This is the Phoenix mind, where the fire refines, break the chains and rise to shine. Rise on the lead with heart, every end a brand new start. With Lisa Manzo we transform, we ignite. This is the Phoenix mind.
Hi, I'm Lisa Manzo, your host of the Phoenix Mind podcast. And today my special guest is Chris Wasko, and I'm going to read you her bio so you can learn all about her because she's awesome. Chris is an energy healer, spiritual counselor, and psychic medium connected to guiding individuals on their healing and personal growth journeys. She specializes in trauma recovery, helping old souls and survivors of narcissistic abuse heal through uncovering deep soul lessons, restoring energetic balance, and supporting nervous system regulation. Chris empowers her clients to navigate life's challenges and reclaim their true potential. Welcome.
Thank you so much.
I'm so glad you're here. So tell my audience your story because I know what it is because you told me a little bit about it, but it's so interesting about your parents. Talk about your journey.
Yeah, so my story, I feel, started a little late in ways because my life changed so dramatically. And what the way that changed is because I made a very difficult decision to cut off my extremely narcissistic parents. And making that decision, what I didn't realize was not only going to change my life and my children's lives, but it was going to open me up to spirit. Because as I started to heal, because I was healing my mind, my body, it opened me to spirit. I would be talking to somebody, and all of a sudden I would see somebody in spirit in my mind's eye right behind them. And over time, I recognized that the more calm our nervous system is, the more open we are to those spiritual gifts. So while I had hints of it growing up, it was so muted by my trauma. So ultimately, cutting them off changed my life because I was able to heal myself. I was able to regulate my nervous system, and I was able to really unpack what narcissism is and narcissistic abuse. And, I would certainly call myself, self-proclaimed expert because it's what I lived my entire life. And I had to undo a lot of those old patterns and programming. So that was about almost 9 years ago, I cut them off. And my only regret is not doing it sooner.
Wow, that must not have been an easy decision. Was there like a final straw that broke the camel's back moment?
Yeah, well, and when I say my regret is not having done it sooner is, I grew up in a very volatile and violent home. And my dad, when he had hit my first child, when my child was 2, that should have been the time I cut them off. But I actually chose to forgive them. My mom was part of it, of being a very toxic situation, of making me out to be the problem. And I was still rather broken in ways. And, they were my parents and my family, and I didn't want to break away from that, especially as a newer mother. I had my 2-year-old at the time and a 6-month-old, and I had left the room because I had been nursing my 6-month-old and I needed to go get a burp cloth. And when I came back, I saw the look on my 2-year-old's face, and I knew the look because I used to wear it. And I was devastated. I felt like I failed him. And that should have been the time I cut them off. But anyone that knows when you're in any kind of narcissistic relationship, it's a cycle of abuse. So it's not always awful. So I got an apology and, oh, we'll do better and all of that stuff. And then it took another 8 years, and my dad had threatened my husband. And that was I'm not doing this anymore. You're not going to hurt any other member of my family. And that was it.
I bet your husband was happy.
Yes, yes. And I have to say, I'm really grateful to him for being so supportive of me. I don't think I would have been as supportive had one of his parents laid a hand on any of my kids. I would have lost my mind. So the fact that he had he has a calmer disposition than I am, and he's a more forgiving soul, but again, because of my trauma and my upbringing, I was predisposed to accept those kind of behaviors, even towards my children, which I think I've had to really work very hard to forgive myself for. I think I'm still working on that one because, like I said, I feel like I failed him.
Well, it's so interesting. So here, I'm going to show you this because this is something I struggled with also. So I have this card.
Oh, I love that.
And
Yeah.
it says, give yourself permission to be human and then forgive yourself because I
Yeah.
struggled with that. I used to beat myself up and about all these things about, oh my God, you were such an awful parent. You did this, you did that. And if you talk to my kids, I was a good parent. So,
Yeah.
so I had to learn to forgive myself and you're learning to do that and you'll get there. You'll get there.
Yeah, I believe I have in ways. And I think, being at this place, I'm very grateful for this healing journey because I've recognized cutting off my parents helped me be a better mother, helped me be a better wife, and helped me be a better person. It's amazing how narcissism kind of, you kind of wear the cape of it. Even
Yeah.
if you don't necessarily become it, it kind of it creeps in ways. So I had to unlearn some old toxic behaviors myself.
I know this is a little bit off because we're talking about you and how you healed it, but how did your children, when you finally cut them off, how did they shift? Because were they happy? What happened for them?
That's a great question, and no one's asked me that one. At the time, my oldest was 10, and I would say it was a little drawn out because I had made the decision to cut them off, and I want to say about 3 weeks later was my oldest 10th birthday. And because my parents were mad at me, they chose to ignore him on his birthday. So that just further validated my choice and decision because I was like, you've got to be kidding me because obviously he's completely innocent in this. And so I think that was kind of foundational for him to see who they really were. And over the years, because again, when you have narcissistic parents, there's a lot of stereotypical tendencies. And I would get a lot of nasty notes and letters and phone calls over the course of this time apart. And, my parents, my children were sometimes witnessing this because it wasn't always expected. And I would, of course, react. And, I remember this was so good. So my oldest is rather intelligent. And I say this because he received a letter from my mother. And my mother is very stereotypically a covert narcissist and very manipulative. So when he got a letter from her, you know, I read it first and then I said, okay, I don't want to shield my kids because I want them to know who my parents are so they don't ever feel like this desperate need to know them. I'm showing them. And when my son read the letter, it was highly manipulative. And he looks at me and he says, I'll never forget this. At the time, he was studying fallacies. And he says to me, I recognize that grandma utilizes the appeal to pity fallacy, while grandpa utilizes the appeal to fear fallacy. And I just sat there and I walked over to my husband and I said, he just summed up my parents in like a moment, what I couldn't sum up in like 30 plus years. It was mind blowing.
Isn't that crazy?
It was
And
mind blowing.
they can
So
just see it because
they
their
see.
minds aren't complicated from all the other stuff inside, and they can just see what it is. And I think that what a great story.
Yeah, it was great. It was just surreal at the time because I was like, I can't even believe he said that. But he was right. But he saw it so clearly, it was, just calling something out and just very neutral about it too. He wasn't angry. He was just more of, this is who she is. And I don't really want this in my life. She's tried many things over the years, especially to him, trying to manipulate, and he has seen it so clearly. Because in the beginning, I kind of struggled with how do I manage this? Can they have a relationship where I'm not in it? But again, the more I regulated my nervous system, got stronger, I recognized for my own mental health, it was important to shield my children from my parents. They were not safe having a relationship with my parents. I knew that, and I needed to just be like, we're not doing this. So any letter that came, my husband and I would look at first and decide if we want to show them or if we're going to save it for maybe a later time when they're older.
How old are your kids now?
So my oldest just turned 18 this year. and is thriving, doing amazing. And yeah, my youngest is 11. I have four children in total.
God bless you. Two is enough for me.
Yeah. Yeah, my youngest two don't really remember them very much. But again, have just seen a lot of the things over the course of the years. And, any child that sees their parent get hurt, it's going to do something. So, probably just witnessing the very negative behaviors over the years kind of helped my children form their own opinions. Obviously, with my oldest being 18, my mother thought she could get in. So on the day he turned 18, she slipped right in, trying to bribe him with money. And, and I didn't know it, and that's fine. He told me, he shared with me, and he said, I'm not going to be bought. And I
Good
said,
for
oh, good for
him.
you. Good for you.
Good for him and good for you, Mom, for you and your husband helping him. Just guide him, like not shielding him, because
Yes.
I'm a firm believer in not shielding kids because they're gonna you're not helping them.
You're
You
not,
need to
you're
help them
keeping them in the
navigate
dark.
it. This is,
Yeah.
hey, this is what's going on. This is what I'm thinking. This is what I'm doing. And you know what? Sometimes they have great ideas.
It's true. And it helps them make their own decisions and make their own choices. They're not just following you. I mean, to a degree, yes, children follow their parents, but I do believe in them making their own decisions. And my son especially recognized that in this past 8, almost, going on 9 years, that he never once got an apology for them blowing him off on his birthday at 10 years old. So that's what he remembers. So them trying to come and just give him a big check, I'm very glad I've brought him up to be better than that. That he's
Yeah.
not going to be bought, and that those were his words. So I was really appreciative of that as a parent. Like, you want to have a relationship, I understand, and we could talk about that, but it should be on your terms.
I think that's great that through your own trauma, you were able to guide your children past it and yet let them see it for themselves.
Yeah.
Because that's not always easy as a parent because our first thing is to protect and I think the harder job is to let them see and then just guide them through it, which is so awesome that you're able to do. So I have another question for you. So you said so through this you were able to connect with spirit, right? That's
Yeah.
your word. I think it's great. Some people use universe, some people use God. You
Yes. Yeah.
right. I
Yeah.
just want to put that out there so that
Beautiful. Yes.
we all understand these words. Whatever word is yours, use, that's fine. So you connected with spirit. How does that work for you? Like, do you hear a voice? Do you do writing? How does that work?
It's evolved for me over time. In the beginning, I would feel. So that's known as clairsentience. So I could feel if a spirit was present. I'm also very good at reading the living, like people, personalities. I could see a picture, I could hear a name and never have met the person. And be able to do a read on them. But in the beginning, it was more mediumship where I would feel, and then I would start to see in my mind's eye, and then I would start hearing because all my clairs were opening. So I essentially was able to communicate. I had to learn how. I started taking classes because they don't communicate like we do.
Yeah.
So learning that was important at that time. And through the course of doing this as a job, I guess it's even weird to say that, but uh, I started working more with the living than the dead because I just prefer it. I feel like helping people through their traumas because I'm so well versed in that myself, helping people that have dealt with narcissistic abuse. And so now my work is ultimately energy reading and energy healing. So I can read somebody's chakra system. There's 7 main chakras, and I'll go in and I'm basically finding the imbalances, the traumas, those elements, and then I like to give people then exercises or just somatic practices to help them heal their energy body because the energy body gets the attack first, the symptoms show up in the body later. So sometimes people are symptomatic, other times not, but I at least give these reads so that they kind of have an idea, and they generally relate to what I say, having told me very little about what's going on in their life, but they just show up with me either on Zoom or in my office here.
That's so interesting. So it's very interesting how different people perceive it. If I'm with a client and it's quiet in my on my end and they're in a very emotional state, sometimes I can hear their thoughts in my head in their voice.
Oh, interesting. You'll hear it in their voice.
Yeah, which is so bizarre. And the first time it happened to me, and I had a friend who have to be I don't have too many of these friends. It's no longer a friend who was doing something for me. I won't give too many details because I don't want the person to know that I'm talking about them. And I heard in my head, in his voice, and this was the end of our friendship. I can paralyze you right now.
Oh, wow.
I
That's a
heard it
great statement.
like clear as day. I'm like, I looked at him, his face was neutral,
Yeah.
same as it was. And I said, I'm really good for today. Well, I was getting a massage, right? I was like, I'm good for today. Thank you so much for your service. And I ended it right there.
Yeah.
And had my son not been in the house, I think it would have been a whole different event.
Wow. What an experience.
So that was the real beginning. And then I started after I heard that because it was said with such anger and such passion that I
Yeah.
could hear it. And he was serious. There's nothing you can say for me to think otherwise. And so after that, I was more in tune to my clients. And then I started not doesn't happen very often. And sometimes I don't hear their voice. I'll just hear ask this question. And I'll ask that question and they'll be like, how did you know? I'm like,
Mhm.
like, it was just given to me to help you heal.
Have you noticed that happen on like a more positive level where you'll hear somebody and it's in their voice?
Not yet.
The reason I ask, because in my understanding, I haven't experienced this personally, but when we hear someone else's voice, it's considered telepathic, not clairaudience.
Uh-huh.
So I
Yeah.
just find that so interesting because I have not communicated in that manner with somebody. So that's why I wonder how it works on a positive for you.
I don't think that, and I just, this is just my thought process that the anger is such a much more powerful emotion and has so much more, not that it's more powerful, it has more energy to it.
Yeah, it's intense. Hmm.
Than the joyful emotion had.
Yes.
So I feel like I have yet to connect to it. But the fact that that happened to me actually opened the door for my intuition to increase. So I mean, I'm still grateful for the event because it let me see how much more I can let in.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Right. And I always want to look at it. Okay, what did I gain from it? That's my always my mantra. What did, through all the stuff that happened to you, so what did you gain from having not so this is a question for you. What did you gain from having narcissistic parents?
Well, a lot of my intuition is because of having narcissistic parents. I had to anticipate movements. I had to anticipate moods and behaviors. Was I going to get a hit today? Was I going to get screamed at? So while it put me in a trauma response, because I was in fight or flight most of my life, uh, ultimately it helped when it came to reading people, reading situations. So I'm certainly appreciative of the fact that I gained something from that, and perspective. I think I recognize myself as a cycle breaker, and I see just over the several generations how broken our families are on both sides, and that I had a choice and I could have become that too, or not exactly like them, but a different version of that, just like they did and just like their parents did, and so on and so forth. So making the decision of it ends with me was really powerful. So I'm grateful for that, and having that perspective was really important.
Well, thanks for sharing because when I say that to some of my clients, they're like, "What's there to be grateful for?" And there always is something to be grateful for.
Always,
But,
always.
but I mean, I know there's some really bad things that happened to people, and so maybe not every time, but usually there's something to be grateful for.
Yeah, I think what's hard is, and I remember being at that place, we think of the horrible things done to
Yeah.
us, and we're like, how could we even be thankful for that? I was sharing a story with a friend of mine this morning, and this is one of my best friends. I've known her for over 20 years, and she's like, I've never heard this story. I can't even believe this. And she's heard so many of the stories. Um, I said, yeah, I guess I'm just not at that place anymore where I'm like sharing these stories from a victim mentality. It's more of like I share it just to show, like, gosh, I got so far. I'm so grateful to be at this place and I'm so grateful to be away from it. So, it really takes a lot of healing, I think, to be able to look at the blessings in even the most horrible of situations.
Yeah. Yeah. I just, I try, it's not always the easiest thing to do in that moment is to, so how does it work with, I don't even know what to say on the last one, so we're just going to leave it there. So how does it work with, with you're a medium? So what does that actually mean? So explain that to my audience for those that don't understand.
Yeah, a lot of people will use it interchangeably, but the way I was taught is that a medium is someone that serves as a medium between worlds or planes. So when you're communicating with spirits, you're communicating with angels, ascended masters, galactic beings. That's considered a form of mediumship. Where a psychic is more of you're reading. More of like the living. I mean, there's different elements of psychic too. There, there's precognition, there's telling the future. I like to work with reading people's energy. When it comes to future reading, because people have so many paths, it's, you know, it's a little trickier because it's like, okay, I see these paths right now. This one's highlighted, but that doesn't mean you don't have other options and there's free will. So that's why I give myself the title, or I connect with the title of psychic medium.
Yeah.
But I also say, I'm like, but I don't really do a lot of mediumship anymore. So I may be stepping away from that entirely, but at least for now, I'll still hold on to it and just see where I'm guided.
Do you connect with people like, so if you have a client, do you connect with family members that have passed to the other side?
I used to, but yeah, I don't anymore.
And I know you can shut it off if I know people can shut it off because I had a friend who used to see auras,
Mm,
the people's auras, and she shut it down because she would see people's auras and they would be black.
yeah, that's hard. That's
And
hard.
it's hard because for the audience, do you want to explain what that means? Or should I?
I mean, it's ultimately darkness, but it often means that if you can't see someone's aura, that means they're coming close to the end of their life. Um,
Right.
and then if it's kind of fuzzy, some darkness, that
Yeah.
means they could have a negative entity attachment. They
Yeah.
could be very evil in a way.
Yeah.
But yeah, once you see any kind of darkness in an aura, it's not a good sign.
Yeah, I have an interesting relationship with the other side. At times I can tell when, and it doesn't happen often, but it's happened to me enough that I know it's there, that I can know when somebody's at the end of their life. I don't see anything. It's more like just a knowing. And I can give the example of I saw my dad on a Saturday, and when I kissed him goodbye, I gave him a hug. And then I knew when I walked out the door I was going to see him again.
Yeah, that's
And
hard.
it's not a, and that was unusual for me because usually it doesn't, I don't connect to it with a family member. It's usually I can connect with it to somebody I don't really know well.
Yeah.
And that recently happened with I was on a podcast with somebody, and then he invited us to have a one-on-one consultation with him. And I did. I made the consultation, and then I called up my friend who referred me to him, and I said, "There's something wrong with him. I
Mm,
don't know what it is, but there's something wrong with him." He died like 3 weeks later.
yeah.
It's like it's like the things that I receive. It's very interesting. What's one
Yeah,
of the, go
it's
ahead.
heavy. I mean, I think mediumship is heavy. And because I work with people that deal with trauma, I think that was why I made the decision of pausing the mediumship because I was getting already the heavy with the client, and then someone in spirit was usually a narcissist or their abuser or someone who committed suicide, and I was just getting a lot of heaviness and darkness in whatever was coming through from spirit. So I think we have to recognize our limits in that. So I fully understand when people shut it off. I haven't fully shut mine off yet. I mean, I'll definitely still see when people show up. I'm not like opening the door like, hey, who's coming in? But sometimes, certain spirits are a little pushier than others. So
Uh,
it will depend. But yeah, I think, yeah, it's important to recognize our energetic boundaries.
okay, and so what was one of do you consider your biggest rise from the ashes moment was when you left your parents behind, or is there any other instances you want to share?
That was probably my biggest, but it was also gradual. It wasn't, because I made this choice and then I felt like I kind of fell flat on my face for a while because I was terrified. I was anxious for the first time in my life. Because I was in survival mode and I needed to figure out how to heal. So I feel like I've had a lot of these coming out of the ashes moments of finding these new evolved versions of myself and being able to embody that and being able to shed these traumas. It's been really incredible, but I would say that was the pivotal moment.
And is there any part of your story that you're not typically asked about that you'd like to share?
What I like for people to know, just generally especially for themselves, because, this is where my story I feel helps others, is whenever you're making any kind of change, if it's really intense and dramatic, the energy body has some time to catch up. And so it could kind of be a shock to the system. So if you can, when you're making any kind of change for yourself in your life, know that change, the more it can happen slowly and gradually, the better it is for you and for your system, especially for long-term success. Because, I made this decision so dramatically, it felt to just cut them off and be done. Like I was just in this weird, panic, anxious, didn't know what to do with myself mode. So I could have probably done a little better for myself had I probably had a more gradual aspect. I don't know if that would have been possible with my parents, but I say this for others. If you're able to make more gradual changes, you'll serve yourself and your energy better.
Yeah. And you seem to have a good support system. I think your young son, who's 18 now, was a huge support as well as your husband. And
Yeah.
how did that benefit you? And did that give you the strength to cut them off?
The support in the beginning, I felt like it was more about me finding my own strength because, at the time, my children were still fairly young. So I wasn't looking for them for support. And, my husband and I have always been a really good team. So I think I, at the time, was just so grateful that he was with me and we were getting through it together. So yeah, having him was rather pivotal because I mean, I did a lot of crying. I was a mess. And then anytime I would hear from my mother in a way that was always so nasty, it always opened a wound again. So I would just go back to this crying little girl of, just wanting to be loved and he was there loving me. And I needed that. And I'm really grateful to have had that.
Awesome. So I've got two more questions for you. The first question is whether you repeat something you already said or give my audience something new. If they're in a time of struggle, what's a tool they can use to help them through something if like, they're in the fight, fight, or freeze mode?
So it's usually those are the ones where breath is really helpful because when we're in fight, flight, or freeze, we're not breathing very well. So we're in this kind of intensity or pause. And sometimes it's hard to breathe. So I like to tap the higher heart chakra. It's basically between your throat and your heart. So that higher heart chakra, you tap that because you're allowing the energy to move. So even if you're not able to take deep breaths, because sometimes when we're in it, it's really hard to breathe.
Yeah.
But this is a little easier. And then because it's it's in your lung area, it can then trigger you to create a deeper breath. So then it's like, And it's not a cure-all, but it's something in the moment that will help your nervous system not go into the intense overdrive that those situations usually create.
Awesome. And when somebody wants to learn more from you, how can they do that?
The easiest place to find me is my website, which is my name, chriswasko.com.
Awesome. And I want to say thank you so much for being my guest today.
Thank you for having me, Lisa. This was great. I appreciate it.
It was. And I'm Lisa Manzo, your host, and I'll see you on the next episode of the Phoenix Mind podcast.
This is the Phoenix Mind, where the fire finds. Together we rise, transform our lives. So subscribe, share the